Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today, AI-powered operations, moving from GenAI hype to human-centric automation reality, sponsored by our friends at InfoCap. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up ERPA AI and the Digital Enterprise Institute. And if last year was the year of GenAI, I'll tell you the last 3 or 4 months of the year, at least on our network, was the year of Agentic AI. I think every conversation that I had in the fourth quarter of last year was around Agentic AI. Lots of questions around definitions and how it affects previous technologies, RPA, Gen AI, and all the lot. So I think we've got a good one for you, our first webinar of the year here. And excited to introduce the panelists that we've brought together for today's session, which I'll do in just a moment. Before I do, quick intro on ERPA AI. For those of you that don't know us, we're a professional association focused on automation, AI, and digital transformation. We've got over 130,000 members worldwide, all coming to us for help around this space, right? RPA, intelligent automation, AI, and kind of broader ramifications of digital transformation. So if there's anything that you're working on, need help with, please reach out to me or my team. We should have a resource for you. If we don't have the answer, get you in touch with somebody who does have the answer, and happy to help you along your journey. So let me introduce today's panelists. We've got two great experts. First, Kieran Gilmurray. He's an analyst for ERPA AI and senior AI and automation expert. We've also got Nathaniel Palmer, CEO of InfoCap, been in the space for a long time. Real quick, Kieran, if you could give everybody a quick backdrop on what you do, what you've been working on, and your background.
Yeah, 1001 things, Dan, as you said, a senior research analyst with ERPA, 30 years of practitioner experience in tech, business advisory, fractional tech consultant. I deliver talks on AI and leadership around the world globally. I have that sad nom de claire of 30 years of real world experience in strategy and implementing technology. I'm really looking forward to this talk because there is a lot of hype around this, but this is real working technology. So let's separate out the hype with the reality of something that could be absolutely amazing in 2025 and the next numbers of years as well.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for being here. Nathaniel?
Hey, thanks. And what 30 years does hit different, doesn't it? It's but what a 30 years it's been, and it seems like the last year has been a decade in itself. I'm, as Dan had mentioned, the CEO of InfoCap. I was InfoCap's largest customer. I brought them in to help me do a massive transformation that allowed us to pioneer work that I had as an analyst and as a management consultant had described in a theoretical realm, and we actually put into practice and brought about just an extraordinary transformation over a period of about 6 years. And then I fell in love with the company and the team. So I took over as CEO, and a lot of what we do today is building on that, those lessons that we learned, the patterns that we pioneered, and putting those into practice on a large scale. So it's really an exciting time.
Great. Thanks for being here. So format today is very simple. We're going to just have a discussion. I know we have some visual aids kind of help that discussion, Nathaniel, but largely just a discussion between us, and we'll save the last 15 or 20 minutes or so for audience Q&A. So if you have a question for any of us, or even a point that you want us to discuss or debate, please send it over. Send it over in the chat on the side there, and we'll get to as many of these questions as possible. Before we jump in, quick poll. This always helps us kind of drive the conversation, so appreciate if you could, let us know where you are. First question is, what are the greatest drivers for AI in your organization? If you could let us know what they are. And we used to force people, Kieran, to pick one. Now we have this new fancy platform, so you can pick multiple, I believe. But what's your sense as you talk to people? What's the greatest driver other than just FOMO?
Yeah, well, FOMO is it, hype's probably another. But look, when you get down to business basics, this is the oddity. AI is not, modern. AI is an 80-year-old plus overnight success story. Right. And this tech works. So we've all heard metaverse, we're all going to run around with headsets on, dressed as cartoon characters from the waist up. Is it going to work? Not in that instance, but certainly in its correct space. But AI has been working for decades and decades and decades. The bit that's really driving it is, the access to the technology, the cheapness of the technology. And now we're seeing one of what I describe as the latest hype, but workable technologies in large language models and agentics. So why do people need AI? Well, look, we make decisions every day. We take actions every day. We need to do more intelligent, consistent, robust things. And with AI, we can do it. In the past, we were doing stuff like, narrow AI, retention analytics, next best action, all of the things that you would want to drive and grow a business. We moved on to intelligent document process, image scanning, saving lives with cancer or cancer patient lives, with scans, self-driving cars, last mile deliveries. This is massively useful technology that is just worth its weight in gold. And once you understand it, and once you get it working, you will not do without AI. And that goes from the simplest thing. So I use $100 of varieties of, easily accessible technology that I buy online, your ChatGPTs, your Claudes, your Perplexities, all types of things that allow me to be tremendously more productive. Others are seeing that. And then once they get that little bit of AI muscle and get excited by it, which you should, all of a sudden they start investing in, more sophisticated, not necessarily more complex uses of AI. And by goodness, those businesses that adopt AI in the right way, they're accelerating beyond anything that we know. And you can take your classics, your Ubers, your Netflix and everything else, but there's just a mass of what I would describe as not as famous businesses really accelerating and dominating their market because they're investing in doing things a little bit more intelligently, and AI is at the heart of that.
So it looks like 73% are saying greater operational and process efficiency being the top driver, and then after that, it's kind of a split between customer experience, faster time to market, analytics, and expanding output. So that kind of tracks for me. I think it's probably pretty consistent, although I'm seeing more and more on the customer experience side. But that kind of tracks to the conversation. So, Nathaniel, let's kick this off. One of the benefits of Gen AI in general is also one of the challenges, right? Which is how quickly it gets adopted and how quickly it evolves. From an enterprise standpoint, how do you keep up with that? You have to balance a lot more than you do as an individual making ChatGPT your assistant, right? You got to balance risk, you got to balance governance policies, other considerations at scale. How do you kind of do that?
Yeah. And, it's an interesting discussion because there's a real focus on that on the regulatory side, as well as both from a legislative standpoint, as well as practices within large organizations. And in just about every case, I would say that the focus for risk mitigation is being put in the wrong place. It's largely being put on model training as opposed to what's being done with the outcome. And that becomes in the context of just Gen AI, meaning not talking about it in an agentic context where it's AI that acts, where it's simply AI that's producing some result. There, we've got the greatest risk is hallucinations, but also we've got the risk that's coming up more and more about data governance risk, either exposing your own data or using data that you shouldn't be using. And in all of these, there is a fairly pragmatic answer, and it's more about the issue of focusing on the outcome and what's done with the result, as opposed to how that result is created. And for us, and this is in our own work and our own practice, everywhere that an AI generated outcome is used, it's being bound by rules or some means that we can tie it back to explicit policy. So we can come up with a generative result, but that generative result doesn't lead to action which can't be explained, where we can't simply say, well, the algorithm said this, so that's what we did. Instead, it's being used to inform business policies, rules, moments of automation, where we're able to expand the contextual understanding of how to react in that moment, but action is being taken by an established policy that we can tie back to and go back to on appeal or in being upheld in a regulatory scenario.
Kieran, this chart is tough to read. Right? It's so straight up at the beginning about the adoption of users. I mean, I struggled to. I almost didn't see it at first. That ChatGPT was even on there.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, the growth of it, and I love it. Because again, it's brought attention back to AI. And this goes back to some of the things, for years people have been arguing, AI is not intelligent, AI can't do this, AI can't. And when it does do it, so let's take Gary Kasparov when he was doing the chess versus computer, going, AI isn't as intelligent as the person, and if AI beats me, it'll never happen. It'll be amazing. It beats him, and then the next minute goes, look, it's not intelligent. So look, it's so useful. And ChatGPT, and folks, there are other tools. It's a bit like Google now. We don't search, we Google it. Yeah. There's Claude, Perplexity, name it. There's about 1,800, 2,000 LLMs or variations thereof. It's just fantastically useful technology. As I said, I have 4 or 5 different applications open all the time. It's allowed me to be more productive, more creative, more innovative every single day. Now imagine you multiply that across your workforce and you give them $100 worth of tools a month. Now that's not to neglect. I think Dan and Nathaniel made really great points. You need to get your data right. You need to get your rules right. You need to get your education right. You need to make sure that, you've got your risk and governance framework around it. But that's no different than a CRM, an ERP, a data strategy, or anything else. So these aren't new needs or wants or demands. This is recasting the light on top of those, because if you don't get good data quality and governance right, nothing works, never mind ChatGPT. But here's the thing, and this is the bit that worries me all the time, Dan. I constantly get brought into companies, through us to help them reset, restructure, rebuild. And what's actually happening is they're forgetting to continually watch the market, look at the technology, innovate, and put a bit of money and time and training and investment and great people, communication and education into a culture of innovation or a culture of growth. So look, we've got tech, we've had tech for decades. It's almost a case of, look, we don't need any more tech in the world. It just happens to be that it's getting better and better and better. But I'd love to see companies addressing all this, with risk and governance, of course, not denying any of that. But I just wish they would innovate and spend portions of budgets and portions of time every day looking at this great technology, RPA, and other great technologies that allow companies to stay ahead, if not keep up with customer and competitor demands, what their market's doing, what adjacent companies are doing, and so on. So look, more innovation, more governance, more money spent on great technology allows you to usually create an even better business over time. And this technology, damn it, it works so well.
Nathaniel, I alluded to it at the opening, right? Agentic AI is one of ERPA AI's top trends to watch starting last year. Gartner agreed and named it to its top 10, top of its list, the top 10 trends for 2025. Why do you think this has gotten so quickly to the top of the list?
Yeah, it's exciting in that we're now seeing AI that can act. We're seeing it able to do things that was for decades. AI was used for identifying patterns, doing things that is fairly prosaic in terms of outcomes. Now we've got AI that can actually participate in the workforce as a worker, side by side, taking action with the poll response, with the number one driver. What are people looking to get out of AI? It's operational efficiency. Well, it's just as Kieran was describing, it's AI as a force multiplier, whether that's enabling in a contact center scenario, a CSR, to be able to answer questions consistently, as well as the best trained CSR by using a co-pilot or some sort of augmented capability, or where it's actually, which is how we've applied it over the last few years, logging into the same systems, behaving just like a human worker, being held to the same standard, but actually having greater observability and consistency and the benefits that we got from RPA, but in a much more expanded context where it's able to behave much more like a human being.
Kieran, I know you've been writing about this. You may have been the person that introduced me to the term. That I didn't know the term last year, and then all of a sudden it's the only thing I could see across my news feeds and inboxes, and even the content we were starting to put out. Where was it for you that you kind of saw this surge happening? What was it that kind of made it jump out to you?
Yeah, I think it's a bit like Nathaniel said. This is really working technology, and it's one of those what I describe as creation technology. So you walk in, you type something, or you verbalize something in a human way. In other words, in natural language. And the next minute, it produces the most amazing content ever, be that written, be that audio, be that video, or something else. So to actually start to see technology become, and I sometimes hate the word democratized, but this makes sense. Yeah. I don't have to spend millions on PhDs and software engineers to get technology to do the things that I wanted to do. I don't have to build entire IT departments to get it to make and create something. And I think people got their hands on this. And, there's obviously the initial excitement and hype and shiny toy moment. But all of a sudden they started going, oh my God, this really works. I want to answer or create a document. I want to create a poem. I want to put it into my contact center and give my agents real intelligence around, the emotional state of the buyer. I want to get a list on the right-hand side of the screen, an interpretation of how I'm doing in the call, the buyer signal. I want to bring data from a lot of different places. So now I've got technology that is a force multiplier, as Nathaniel said, on top of what RPA is. And RPA has always worked. This just gives it more agency. Now it observes, now it orientates, now it decides, and now it acts all by itself. So I think people are starting to see technology that allows them to be far more performant, make far better and more intelligent business decisions, and allows it to work in a really adaptable, human-like way without having to type in, thousands of lines of deterministic instruction to allow them to get really great personal and business outcomes. And I know this, having used the technology and used lots of it and spent time researching this really is a time where we've got all the sweeties in the toy shop that we will ever need. And they're coming more and more every single day. And now you're starting to see the analyst companies pick up on this and go, oh my God, this really, really works. It's not just hype. And you're starting to see some good quality research. So Nang and Zoe did a piece of research with BCG where they looked at, qualified consultants who were 2-year qualified new consultants who were starting out at the start of the career. And they gave them, large language models, a version of ChatGPT and so on. And all of a sudden their speed to get up to, credible, capable individuals just rocketed. And you start to work those things through from an organizational context. If I can get my people productive, not in 6 or 12 or 24 months, but if I can get them productive in 12 months, 4 months, even 2 months, depending on the tech, that's amazing. If I can provide a lot more intelligent answers when I'm talking to my customers, I'm going to keep customers. Not only that, if I can provide really great insights to my agents, and we're just taking the example of contact center, but there's so many in so many industries, they're more likely to stay inside of my business because I'm now giving them the tools that they need to be performant as well. So the reason is, look, this technology works. It democratizes the life out of everyone and everything that it touches. The benefits are absolutely massive. And the only thing that's happening is we're seeing more and more use cases and more benefits every day. So I'm not surprised people are getting excited in the slightest.
So I hate to be this guy because, we've all in the industry rolled our eyes at the jobs question for every new technology that comes out, right? Whether it's RPA, the early AI, back to the days of ATMs taking the jobs of bank tellers. But, even the World Economic Forum jobs report just came out this month, Kieran, claiming 41% of 1,000 companies they surveyed globally plan to downsize their workforce by 2030. Is this the beginning of the end for at least some job roles?
Let me be the alternative guy that says, I hope so. And that's going to maybe shock people. But look, there are far less saddlers in the world than there are software engineers in 2025. Not that I've anything against saddlers, by the way. Wonderful art, having horse ridden for years. But look, you need to free up capital and you need to free up people to do, more rich, better outcome-laden roles. And let's be honest, none of us are going to really complain if we start using technology to remove mundane, repetitive, complicated tasks that add limited value that allow us to be freed up. What I'm seeing, if I look at the, the real world, I'm looking at, a population that's shrinking. I'm looking at the productivity, and certainly in Europe, going down. I'm looking at the needs and the wants of consumers in particular and competitor businesses. That's moving to 24/7 solutions or demands. They want things quicker, better, faster, more personalized at a greater scale. You can't do that with a declining workforce. We've heard this same conversation right the way back in 1950s. Thank God I wasn't around then. But Kennedy did a speech where he was talking about how data centers were going to suddenly remove jobs. As recently as 8-10 years ago, Obama was talking about automation was going to destroy jobs. And the only thing we've seen is a change of jobs in the economy, more people getting brought into the economy, and us having, and it might not feel like it at times, we are in the best technological, health, economic, and you name it situation that we've ever been in humankind. And the only thing I can see happening is more jobs, more interesting roles, more productivity, more and better and richer economies happening over the next couple of years. And that's down to, AI and a variety of other technologies. But again, go back to it, ain't just the technology. It's about amazing people working with amazing technology in regulatory environments that are conducive to investment and risk taking. So I expect to see more of that in the next couple of years, not the death of roles. But by goodness, doesn't it make for great newscasts and attention seeking when you say jobs are going to be destroyed without actually looking at the facts over the last 80 years?
Yeah.
Nathaniel, I'm thinking, judging by this chart, you have more of a kind of hybrid approach to this, yes?
Well, and this chart's an interesting lens for that conversation. So this is a reference model for how we deploy Agentic AI, which rather than it being just some kind of polymorphous blob that is a bunch of code, that there's actually, it's a system of systems, and it's a pattern, and there's boundaries, and there's an actual approach to it. But the net result of that, and this comes out of a case study that reflects the pattern on how we go to market with these capabilities. But using this as a lens on a particular case study, this collectively replaced thousands of jobs, where over a period of 5 years or so, as this was refined and built out and we added the capabilities, half of the work performed by over 5,000 knowledge workers was, meaning the work doubled. So double the work was performed by 1/5 of the same workers. It's the same, it's double the volume. So the actions are being taken. All of the moments, the steps, the auditable analytics that come out of that work, that's all there. We didn't eliminate work. We eliminated workers, replacing them with digital workers. And that's before Agentic AI had dominated the conversation. Agentic is AI agents. It's what we've called digital workers. It's building out a capability where AI can perform as a worker, and in this case, leading to, from one perspective, the destruction of thousands of jobs. However, it also means that far more cost-effective, more scalable, more predictable work was being performed by AI. I'm confident that the workers that over this period of time that this was rolled out, that are no longer doing that, they're off doing something else, probably AI enabled, probably far more exciting and more interesting. They're not needed for the level of manual work that was displaced here, and that's going to be happening on a massive macro trend scale. I do think that there are going to be what was it you had mentioned, Kieran? Is it saddle makers, or probably those that make saddles today are paid a handsome premium. Yeah. Now it's a bespoke artisan type of industry, and there's a lot of stuff today that is just done in a rudimentary way that will completely go away. What remains that's still done by human beings will be done in a refined artisan sort of way. But absolutely, this will be eliminating the need for jobs and creating jobs in doing so.
So I want to ask the audience to jump in here again. If you could let us know what are your greatest impediments to realizing AI benefits? You know, we've talked a lot about the positives and also the kind of risk and compliance thing. So I'm curious, is that still kind of the biggest impediment, or are there other items that are kind of hurdles for you to really get the benefits of this? And Nathaniel, I'm curious too. I mean, you're speaking to clients on a daily basis without asking you to guess while people are taking this poll, guess the results. I mean, what do you kind of see when you speak to a new client or a prospective client? There's one or two of them jump to the top of the list.
Well, on the top of the list consistently, which is sort of a cop-out of an answer, but it's just simply figuring out where to start. And that's a lot of what we do, is helping with prioritization, not just, but typically does involve identifying a progression of low-hanging fruit, using proof points to move up and start to apply what's learned to do more and more. And we actually came up with kind of backed into describing what we do for our customers as future-proofing as a service. That there's a whole lot of dimensions that go into having a strategy. Karen articulated it far better, that often they jump in, even if they can figure out where to start, and they can get some kind of, if it's beyond an MVP, beyond a pilot, they give something that's working. How do you scale that? How do you evolve that? How do you have a loop where you bring in innovations to continue to build on that? That's where the real challenge is, and that's where future-proofing as a service is our pitch to help with that. But it's understanding how you're going to measure success going in, and then really having clarity and transparency on how that's being measured, so that you're being able to show what is succeeding and what's not. Because not all of this is going to be successful, and you're going to want to not continue to do the things that aren't, but expand the things that are.
Top two responses were lack of internal know-how or competency, and uncertainty as to where to apply. So, makes perfect sense. Okay, Nathaniel. So I'm gonna put you back in the hot seat. So it's not the death of all jobs, but how about the death of RPA? So much of RPA was about automating routine processes. I kind of wonder, as you see all the stuff that AI can do, how much of process will even be routine as things evolve over the next few years.
Yeah, and it's the death of RPA as it was. So when we lived through, I say we, certainly the three of us and many on this session lived through that first major RPA bubble, and expectations weren't met. Not surprisingly, yet a tremendous amount of high value work was done. The challenge was not understanding how to apply RPA and how much was built into the procedural code. I mean, not to go down a technical rat hole, but RPA became overburdened by trying to have it do more. So what you would have is armies of thousands of bots that are effectively glorified macros, as opposed to an enterprise strategy where you are doing stuff, where you are displacing the need for workers, because you've got synthetic workers or digital workers that are right integrated in the workforce and doing the same work, as opposed to just what we called attended RPA. Agentic automation, agentic AI, is inherently unattended, meaning that it has to have agency. It has to be able to behave like workers. And RPA, as it was understood in the past, wouldn't allow for that. You might have some unattended automation, but it was very narrowly focused. It's now the ability to use the same platforms, but augmented with new capabilities to be able to expand what it's able to do. So RPA as it was is dead. but long live RPA, even if we don't call it that, because it is the same capabilities that's going to be driving this.
Karen, agree? Disagree?
Yeah, I do. Do you know what I mean? And long, long may it continue to be dead. Look, think about RPA as just as a original RPA 1.0. Everything was promised. It could do everything for everyone. If you had 50 robots, it was success. Whereas it was to a good extent a little bit of screen scraping and a basic macro. And there's nothing wrong with that, because all of a sudden you could automate thousands of different things inside of a business. And I know businesses who have benefited tremendously from that alone. But RPA has evolved into a suite of products. You're talking about intelligent document processing, business process management, decision intelligence, data services, API integration, iPaaS, and that's continued over the years. So it's a vibrant ecosystem of platforms that allow you to recreate essentially what we do as humans, the thinkety think, the clickety click, for want of a better phrase. Now, as Nathaniel said, we've got Agentics, which is again another iteration on top of the digital workforce. So instead of predeterministic, rote workflows, discrete predefined tasks, and the usual exits and exceptions, now all of a sudden we've got an additional tool set or capability here that observes, that orientates, that decides and acts, and allows us to do so much more. So I welcome the destruction of old RPA. I welcome when we get through the hype phase of any technology, because it doesn't matter whether it's RPA, ERP, CRM. We appear to go through these cycles where the vendors sell the latest shiny toy, the buyers lap up the latest tool that can do absolutely everything. And we know when you go around a golf course, the 7-iron isn't going to allow you around every single hole. But this technology is amazing when applied in the right way. And you really need to understand. If you don't, just come to a vendor who has spent a little bit of time in the trenches, made all those mistakes, and can get it to work for you much, much more quickly. So long may RPA 0.1 go away and stay away. But this is far from dead. This is a vibrant ecosystem that will keep growing, as you can see now with Agentics alone.
Nathaniel, I heard you say once before that the goal is to be able to act sooner, not just faster. What do you mean by that?
Well, every event has a shelf life, or what we call a half-life, meaning that the value of acting on that decays over time. And in virtually every case, that's not a straight line, it's a curved line, meaning the value decays very quickly up front, and then eventually it just kind of peters out. The ability to realize value from that action is time dependent. And there are a couple of different disciplines that have been applied to this, and I've combined two here. One is the OODA loop that we can't escape in any discussion about, particularly about AI or anything analytics oriented. And that notion of observing oriented, deciding and acting, applying that same method to understanding the notion of analytical latency and what happens between being able to identify, so observing and being in a position to know when an event happens. That moment of time in which it's being identified is sometime after it's not instantaneous. So some amount of time has transpired, and the value of your response is already declining. Then there's the understanding. Well, what happened? What is the context here? Before we determine what we should be doing as a response, and that's the decision-making or analytical latency. And then ultimately, now that we know what we should do, we're acting on that and we're completing that action. And then finally, we're at the end of that cycle where we've responded to that event. So time has transpired and value has been lost. In the context of agentic AI, the ability to act instantaneously and to do so with well-defined parameters, so not simply having an algorithm just determine what's probably the right action, but having as much intelligence as possible built into that, but using the various dimensions of agentic AI, and this is where we get into this notion of agents, that a departure from what we promote with how modern RPA should be used, which is to not have a long tail of bots, but having a digital worker built from the platform of RPA. Agents is different in that it's around the specialization. The more specialized, the better equipped individual agents are. So having agents that are there waiting for the signals, agents that are able to then quickly take the signals and translate that into understanding of context, agents that are able to take that and then determine what the outcome is, and then ultimately give that to the actor, whether that's a human or a robot. Now we've understood what has happened, what we should do, and we've got the means to act on that. So we're optimizing the value of our response, but this is really how agentic AI works. It's through the collaboration or coordination of these different pieces. It's not just magically pumping data into an algorithm.
So how would you explain agentic workflows? Are they different than traditional ones, Nathaniel?
They are, and if we apply that the same lens that we were talking about of the OODA loop and having that decision-based response with an agentic workflow, each action is based on the context of that moment, and it's in most cases impossible to define that in the way that we would traditionally do with procedural workflows and procedural flows, which is how we would want to apply RPA and how we would apply most areas of automation. Because here, the next best action is the one that we want to take and is defined by unique circumstances, not necessarily defined by a predefined flow. Above this, there needs to be orchestration, and that is one of the things that's missing from a lot of the high-level discussions, particularly coming out of the LLM players and others, as they're talking about capabilities and coming up with large action models and things that are able to take action. That still needs to be managed and orchestrated. But what the actions are and the workflows for applying the situational awareness to what that next best action is, that is going to be very contextualized and very much driven by decision logic rather than procedural logic.
So I want to remind everybody we're going to do audience Q&A in just a few moments. So if you could start sending in any questions you have for Kieran or Nathaniel or even myself, please go ahead and do that through the chat now. And let's ask one last polling question before we get into the last segment here, guys. And the question is, how would your organization measure ROI from AI? Curious if you've thought this through, or if that's maybe one of the hurdles you mentioned before. How are you thinking about measuring it, Kieran? I know you speak a lot on this and advise a lot on this, and I know it's a multi-hour session, but give me some of the highlights.
Yeah, look, I love the question straight away, because where RPA 1.0 failed a lot is that people put in the technology wherever they could. For example, I'll not name them to not shame them. I walked into global organization to fix where someone had set up the objective of getting 100 robots into place. And I come in and I said, well, where did you put the robots and why did you put them there? And we just wanted 100 robots, So all of a sudden there was absolutely zero business case from the off. Right. And that's a difficult conversation to have as a head of automation, a head of IT or whatever else, when the CFO inevitably comes up and she says, okay, show me how this technology is actually working for the business. Show me how it's reinforcing strategy. And you can't. So unless you're actually starting, and let me start from two ends here, because too often we look at the operational efficiency perspective alone and say, how can we put digital workers in to reduce cost, reduce headcount, and whatever else? And that's fine, and that can happen, and that's, you know, relatively easy. And if we have a really great people strategy, we already have those people trained for new roles. Because let's be honest, if you're sitting doing a mundane role that can be copied easily by technology, that is going to happen. And therefore, it's incumbent upon the organization and yourself to own your own career so that you have the skills that you need to continue to be valuable inside of that organization or market or whatever. But here's the joy. You know, you can use automation, Agentics, RPA, whatever, to grow the top line as well and introduce new ways of working, new business models and something else. How will I measure all those things? Well, I'm a traditionalist. I like to think of something in pounds, pennies, dollars, and cents. So first of all, I'm going, is there going to be an economic return out of this for the organization? First one. Second one, and this is where you start getting a balanced scorecard of benefits from one automation alone. If I remove the mundane and the monotonous, of course, my employee NPS is going to go up. As Nathaniel mentioned earlier on, if I put this technology in, it provides consistency, accuracy, rigor around risk, then all of a sudden I'm reducing my risk, I'm improving the quality of my controls and everything else. I'm reducing the repeat work that I might have to do. And guess what? Imagine providing really great, consistent service to customers 24/7. Immediately, as Nathaniel's saying, when it comes to Agentics and RPA, or almost immediately. But imagine introducing, and Dan, I think we posted about this on the ERPA network the other day, something called anticipatory AI. So Amazon are looking at the moment based on past purchase patterns and behaviors and looking at what people like you do and what you've ordered to actually provide the product or the service in advance of you actually running into the need or the problem. Imagine putting that in, and the NPS of the customer could go through the roof as well. So for me, look, tie anything you do, and it doesn't matter the technology, but the business case, be that operational efficiency, top line, reduction in risk, customer NPS, staff NPS, and whatever it is, just really have a good business case, not only you, but with the business as well, having negotiated that and get that business value over the line and then celebrate, go to the next thing and the next thing. And all of a sudden you have that flywheel of innovation driven by great people, great technology that's going to deliver a return on your investment that really makes perfect sense. So it's not one thing, it's multiple things.
Yeah, and what's so interesting looking at the poll results is it's pretty even across the board, which makes this both exciting and challenging for, you know, people in the space, right, to address this. I mean, I think when we asked this question for RPA, it was always a landslide. There was one, maybe two. This is pretty even. I mean, productivity increase looks like 60 something people responded to the poll. 75% said productivity increase, but everything else is kind of right behind it. So it's definitely a mixed bag. So before we get to audience Q&A, Nathaniel, we promised the audience some real use cases and ROI numbers. I'm hoping you can share some of the top challenges your customers have encountered and what sorts of outcomes they've been able to gain through this.
Absolutely. And I would use this as a lens on everything Kieran has said, as well as what I've said, and see if there's anything here that what we're saying, and what we're talking about here is more so challenges in the broader sense than use cases in the specific sense. But the notion of generating ROI based on being a force multiplier, whether that is doing more with less, which means reducing a workforce or keeping a workforce in place and expanding business. But it also means getting into areas, being able to go after business opportunities, business lines that were otherwise out of reach because the economics weren't there, but the economics change now with this force multiplier. Somewhere right now, as we speak, is a startup that is a $1 billion sole proprietor. So how are they going to do what they're doing? And it's applying exactly what we're talking about here, probably in the same way. And for everybody watching this, there is somewhere in their organization, a $1 billion opportunity to be delivered in a sole proprietor context, meaning that it could be delivered through the complete leverage of these capabilities. The reality is that's not what our customers are seeing, and that's not necessarily what we would expect to see. But that potential lies in every organization. But in what we've found is in all of the challenges that are bounded by workforce issues, meaning fluctuations of work volumes, the need to rapidly scale, the need to horizontally scale and take know-how across the organization instantaneously, things that are very difficult to do with people. People can do things that today our AI and RPA can't do, but what they can't do is to receive instructions in that instantaneous way and to do things where we can scale with technology, and using that to expand work, both in terms of accommodating growing work volumes in just about every case. And one of the common threads for our customers is that we're supporting the mission of an organization that has a consumer, a member, somebody at the center of gravity of their mission, and that we're enabling them to support them better, and in many cases to expand the envelope of who they're able to address. So to be able to expand their customer base or their member base, because now they're able to accommodate things that they weren't able to accommodate when it was based on having to have human-based skills and a focus on a delivering those capabilities through a workforce. On the next slide, just talking about some of the proof points and success points that came out of that. I mentioned, and it is one case, but it's one that these data points are really a composite of multiple customers that we have particular examples to use as proof points. But that idea of being able to demonstrate 500% efficiency gain, it's not just through automation. It's at the early stage of RPA, there were plenty of case studies that could speak to that, but they were short-lived. That notion of being able to continuously expand and realize the efficiency gains, not simply by eliminating things that shouldn't have been done, but to allow for that high touch, increasingly complex work that otherwise required a skilled knowledge worker to be able to be done really in just about every case here. It is a hybrid scenario where we're using AI and these capabilities as a force multiplier, as the means to augment the ability of the human workforce and to do a lot more, but also to do things better, more consistently, with greater transparency, and to get into levels of complexity. Just a simple example to kind of prove that notion of how we expand the complexity with AI. In a very basic sense, with RPA, we had a use case where a robot could not look at a series of documents and assess that these all belong to the same individual in a way that a human being could, because there are nuances. It might say Dan Goodstein, Daniel Goodstein, D Goodstein. That could all be the same person, but to a robot, you don't want it to guess that. So we used a specialized AI capability to be able to do that name disambiguation. So in an example I just gave you, that's pretty basic, and we're bringing RPA up to the level of what a human being can do. But extend that to highly nuanced cultural nicknames and knowing even stuff that's commonplace. I had a good example that I've forgotten, but Chewy, which is a common Hispanic nickname, relates to something that doesn't resemble the word Chewy at all. And there are tens of thousands, if not millions, of permutations like that, which we can use AI to be close to 100% accurate on. There's no human that could ever know all of that. And it's the ability to get the leverage of scale of a really complex corpus of information, to use that as the way that we're applying AI, and then allow for it at the base level to enable automation to be human-like in terms of being able to have not subjective interpretation, but informed interpretation, but then to take that way beyond the scale of what humans could do on their own, even in scenarios that are basic. We're not talking about curing cancer here. It's basic transactional stuff.
Yeah.
It's giving that leverage that that we can't otherwise get from the human workforce.
No, great. Love it. Love it. So we have a few audience Q&A questions. Let me start. Mark has a question here. I'll start with you, Kieran, because I think Nathaniel addressed some of these, case studies. And any other case studies you'd add, Kieran, around the value of agentic AI and what improvements do you see happening in the near future?
Yeah, look, let's take something random but example based. So when we're talking about agentic AI, comparing that to RPA, one, predeterministic, exceptions, whatever. The other is, you give it a goal and it works things out. So, I've seen stuff like take the Fukushima plant in Japan, where it was submerged by, tsunami numbers of years ago. You've now got, digital workers, digital physical robots under the surface going in where humans can't go. You cannot possibly predict every single scenario they're coming across, but they're actually working it out for themselves because the agentic AI is doing it. I'm starting to see customer service applications, conversational agents inside the businesses now. Customers are having what I would describe as, human-like intelligent conversations. You're not having to imagine every scenario from day one, but actually based on, as Nathaniel said earlier on, the context and based on the customer information and the questions they're asking, the digital workers actually starting to work these things out to provide an intelligent answer, at scale 24/7 in a much more personalized way. Those are two very simple examples of how agentic AI is making a difference in lots of businesses today. But it goes, there's so many examples now. I take some of the large multinational banks who are starting to use agentic AI to intelligently look for instances of fraud. And then to Nathaniel's point earlier on, not just do it and flag it to an agent, but to actually do something about it and make a very intelligent decision to allow the transaction to alert you as an individual, to put a hold on it. The use cases are there. I sort of say this in the way I feel about technology for years is we've all the technology in the world that we want. It's now down to our imagination as to how we apply it and where we apply it, as well as good economics. So we want a good ROI out of everything that we put in place as well. But if you type in, anything you're worried about in your industry, again, dare I say, go into ChatGPT, Google, Perplexity AI, and type in industry, agentics, use case or case study, and you will get a whole list of things appearing in front of you, even at this moment in time.
Nathaniel, there's a question here from Jacob. He's saying for AI to gain trust in decision making, it has to function as a glass box rather than operate as kind of an opaque black box, which is the term we've always used about AI. How do you guys approach this?
Absolutely, and that underlies our fundamental philosophy on applying agentic AI. That it's got to be transparent, it's got to be accountable and provable. A lot of the work, meaning I can't think of any scenario that doesn't fall into this. It's work that we're doing is either for a government customer or a highly regulated customer, and where in every case they need to be able to prove why was this decision made, and not just in the moment, not from a QA standpoint, but upon appeal, upon audit, in many cases going back months, if in some cases years later, and being able to show this decision was made based on these circumstances, these data, these rules. This is part of the record. This is part of the accountability. Every outcome has to be held to that standard for the work that we do, and that's what we would want for any case. When we're starting to already see that, where there's been some trials of using AI to do things that's consequential. Let me give an example that's not consequential that fits right with what Kieran was saying. Just yesterday, I appealed a purchase. I got the wrong Nespresso pod. So I went to Amazon customer service and said, hey, you suggested I buy this because I have this machine. Why would you suggest something that's not going to fit with my machine? The agent said, all right, we'll give you a refund. Where do you want it to go? Here. That was not done by a human. So that was done by agentic AI. Simplified agentic AI? Absolutely. But at scale. And it may have been tied back to rules, probably was in that case, but it doesn't. That's a level where using an algorithm to come up with confidence bands to say, yeah, we can give them a pass. Not a lot of money. We're going to keep a customer. That's good. What if that was a health care claim? That's a different level of consequence. And if that was denied, we say, well, why was this denied? What was the criteria for this? The algorithm said so. Well, that should not be acceptable. It absolutely needs to be a glass box. And so that at any moment in time, we can go back and say, this is the policy that was in place at this time. We may have used AI to come up with inputs for this. We figured out that Nathaniel's information was vetted by AI, and we had a sufficient level of confidence that this is his information. And based on that, based on the assumption that this is his information, this is the policy that applied. And the test should be, it's a little counterintuitive. Right now, the test is typically, what would a human do? Well, humans make mistakes. The test should be, under the same circumstances, repeated 1 million times, would the same outcome occur? And with probabilistic AI, with algorithmic decision making, that standard can't be upheld. The majority of the time, it would be, but there would be outliers that would be unfairly disadvantaged because of something in the algorithm. In the same way that with a human being, they can make mistakes as well. We can use AI to get perfected or perfect outcomes, but it has to be bound by demonstrable, deterministic, accountable rules.
Yeah, I'm going to argue against that just a tiny, tiny bit, if you don't mind, because let me just do this before we jump in. Isn't it amazing the standard to which we hold technology and AI, and we forgive humans so much more? Because let's be honest, your local doctor is a black box, because you take their truth every single time and they make mistakes. Your local lawyer, your judge, in every part of society, people make mistakes all the time. Now, the one challenge I would say is, thank goodness for AI, because it can be consistent as long as you code it in the right way, that, from the very first time. And therefore, the fact that we can get to what you're describing, Nathaniel, is almost perfect decision making, will be for society's benefit if we can get that right, because humans are far from perfect. It's not to deny their skill and everything else, but that is one of the benefits of AI and agentic AI, is consistent perfection every time if we truly get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're not in disagreement in any way. I should say that it's the goal, not the standard. And I've run into this in regulated environments where they've said, well, anything less than 100% confidence interval is unacceptable. Well, nothing's going to happen then. But being mathematically almost perfect, because you have enough variables that you've said, there's no way that we would get this wrong with all of these things being true, yet the likelihood of somebody getting it wrong, a human being applying their own subjective decision making, far greater risk there. So that it really is going beyond that threshold or that standard of what would a human do. But you're right, by perfection in decision making, it's the goal, knowing that if we set everything to 11, it's never going to happen.
So true.
Oh, you're on mute, Dan.
Hey guys, last question. If I can squeeze it in, maybe we can do lightning rounders. 30-second answer. What are some of the things people should be looking at if they want to start implementing this? Either from a cultural standpoint or from a leadership standpoint within their organizations. Kieran, can I go with you first?
Yeah, very quickly. I think Nathaniel lent in it earlier on. Look, education. People don't understand what the technology is or does very often. And if you don't understand that, you'll make mistakes. So start with the education, with your executive team, your board, and everyone working your way down. That's the first thing. And the second thing, please, please, please have a really good business case behind what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, go out to a partnership or a group. With Nathaniel's company here today alone, who really understand this. Just get that support, because it'll be far more productive. You'll get far better outcomes. It'll be far less mistakes and far cheaper in the long run. So those three things, please.
And so I concur with all of those. This is slightly adding, although I think it's already captured in what Kieran said, is having understanding mutual agreement on how and when you're going to measure success. And back to Kieran's original point, we've seen so many cases where success was thought to be, we're going to deploy 100 robots. Well, what is the outcome that those robots are doing, and why is it happening? Having clarity on that, which is not just agreement, it's obviously thinking through the yardstick by which success is going to be measured, knowing when it's going to be measured, having agreement on that point in time, because that is one of the things that we insist on and often see lacking, is mutual agreement on the moment in time in which success is going to be measured. That is going to, the circumstances of success are going to evolve over time.
Yep. Gentlemen, thank you. Great session. If you want to keep the conversation going, we're offering a free complimentary industry briefing on Agentic AI, kind of art of the possible session with some of these experts. Go to erpaai.com/Agentic AI for that. In the meantime, look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. And thanks for the team at InfoCap for sponsoring today's session. Have a great week, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.